Hello, everyone. This is Michael from the Audible Local Ledger in Mashpee, Massachusetts, reading today's Providence Journal for Thursday, October 16th. Let's start with the weather. It looks like it's going to be sunny for the next 4 days. For today, windy and cooler, but partly sunny. High of 55, low of 43. For tomorrow, partly sunny, breezy in the morning with a high of 59 and a low of 40. For Saturday, a high of 62, mostly sunny. And for Sunday, abundant sunshine, a high of 64 and a low of 53. On Monday, the rain comes back with a high of 63 and a low of 50. And now for the news. First article, Home at Last, an article in the Providence Journal by Wheeler Cooperwaite. Providence. Walking around one of the new apartments at the new 5-story, 176-unit apartment building at 94 Summer Street, Godfrey Ojator said he couldn't be happier or more grateful. Formerly homeless, Ojator will move likely sometime in November from his current 108-square-foot room in the Crossroads, Rhode Island building known as the Tower to a new 500 to 550 square foot one-bedroom apartment in the Summer Street building. He's hoping for the top floor. For the first time in years, he will have a range, oven, and full-size refrigerator. The biggest quality of life difference won't be easier cooking. Ojator is adept with a rice cooker or more living space. It's the bathroom in every unit. On some floors, the Traveler's Aid housing building, where he is currently living, each bathroom is shared by 12 people. Everyone from the tower is set to be moved to the new apartment building. Moving starts by the end of October at a pace of 6 people a day, with everyone moved in by the middle of December. The Summer Street apartment building has been in the works for 5 years, part of a triangle of developments Crossroads is working on. Architects are working to finish plans and schematics for the renovation and transformation of the tower. When Rhode Island Housing opens its next round of funding, Crossroads will submit its tower proposal in which the 176 9 by 12-foot rooms would be transformed into 80 apartments. Quote, assuming we get funded for this coming round, hoping to start construction in the fall of next year. There's a lot of moving parts, Crossroads CEO Michelle Wilcox said. The Summer Street apartments took more than 5 years to come to fruition. Most of it is spent lining up funding sources and then finding more funding sources as the cost of construction and materials far outstrip the rate of inflation. Crossroads is building an additional apartment complex on Pine Street, a stone's throw from the Tower and the Summer Street apartments. The 35-unit Pine Street apartments will be for medically vulnerable people. The project started with environmental remediation that dug through Providence past with signs that the site was once home to a dry cleaner, an auto repair shop, and a jewelry maker before being paved over and turned into a parking lot, then ripped up and turned into an apartment complex. The cost to remediate the site was $10 million. Ojator, originally from Nigeria, grew up in his mother's restaurant where he learned to cook. In the 9 by 12 rooms in the tower, residents aren't supposed to have cooking devices, but Ojator still has a rice cooker and a little burner, and with it he can make do. However, being a bachelor, he usually just cooks one big meal once a week to last him. With little refrigerators, there's never enough room. Touring the new apartments, he said the refrigerators are about 5 feet tall will make a huge difference in his life. Quote, we don't deserve this. Quote, this is a place you give a retired veteran, you know? And being honest, street guys like us, we don't deserve this, end quote. He moved into the tower in 2019, and before that, he was homeless, first staying at Emmanuel House and then Harrington Hall before he found out about Crossroads. There he found people who cared about him. Quote, they know your difficulty. They tell you, yeah, I've had fights. I've had situations, but they continue to walk with you. They care about the residents, and this is what some people who live there don't realize, end quote, he said. Standing outside in the courtyard filled with new mulch, young plantings, and juvenile trees, Ojator waved to one of the women who works with him, Alexis. Quote, she's been the angel, he said. The new apartment building is permanent supportive housing for people who have been chronically unhoused. That means everyone who moves into the new apartments will be allowed to live there for as long as they like. Rent is set at 30% of a person's income, whether it's Social Security payments or income from a job, and scales up and down as a person's income changes. For many people with disabling conditions, their income will never scale. There's no question that being here will enable some folks to take that next step to employment or more employment, maybe go from part to full-time, Wilcox said. In the tower, the turnover rate is 10% a year, but Wilcox said that figure might fall in the summer street apartments because they are nicer and there are more apartments. For Ojatur, that means he's going to try and pick up some part-time work as a phlebotomist, as he's applied to a few local labs and a plasma donation centers. As his income increases, so will his rent, something Ojatur says he thinks is necessary. While Crossroads has been offering housing to 176 people in the tower, for many people it has felt less like their home and more like a place they're staying, with no closet space, storage, nowhere to store a vacuum, nowhere to cook, just a bed and a desk. Quote, this is a retirement spot now, he said. Quote, it's a retirement resort. That's what I'm calling it. Unless I win the lottery, millions of dollars, and then I'm not living here, end quote. The Summer Street apartments generate enough power from solar panels and consume so little power thanks to efficient design that it is a net zero building after being awarded $2 million in energy incentives. Inside the apartments look like just that, normal apartments. Televisions are mounted against the living room wall. A small table is situated between the kitchen space and the living room space. Across from the TV set is a love seat, and in the bedrooms each have their own bed. The units range in size from 500 to 550 square feet, depending on their placement in the building. Quote, the architects worked with us on the design. We see the plans, we talk about change, and then when you see it in real life, it's beyond any expectations, Wilcox said. The architects talked to her for hours and hours about the ceiling. Like the rest of the floor, it's painted much the same. Orange on the second floor, blue on the first. Quote, so I'm looking at the ceiling and going, this is a beautiful ceiling. Now it's beautiful, but it's also serving a very specific purpose, right? In the sound dampening, it's insulating. So it's just putting almost these little details together. I've been blown away by it when I've seen all the parts and pieces coming together, Wilcox said. Inside one of the units, Ojatur also noticed the details. Behind the front door in each unit is a bench with shelving above it and 2 rows of hooks. At 52, that's something Ojatur keyed. Quote, they even have a mudroom by the wall where they have like 6 hangers. They have something like this you can put your shoe under, end quote, he said, talking in the courtyard, gesturing to a stone bench. For old guys like us, me getting older, you can sit there and tie your shoes. Inside one of the apartments, Ojatur points to the thermostat. Each unit gets it to control its own heating and cooling. Me, I'm a 65 guy, winter, summer, and I like my room at 65, he said. End of article. Next article, ex-gang leader now has a chance at release. An article by Katie Mulvaney. The former leader of the almighty Latin Kings in Rhode Island, who ordered the execution of a rival, will get an opportunity at freedom. U.S. District Court Judge John J. McConnell, Jr. in January overturned the life without parole sentence being served by George Sepulveda, 51, who was the leader, or Inca, of the Latin Kings in the early 1990s. McConnell cited Sepulveda's youth at the time of his crimes, childhood trauma, and the fact that he wasn't the triggerman as the reason for granting him his compassionate release. On October 7th, McConnell resentenced Sepulveda to 40 years in prison on charges that included racketeering and conspiracy that led to the murder of a gang rival, meaning he will have a chance at freedom. In addition, McConnell gave Sepulveda 5 years of supervised release, the first 6 months of which are to be spent at a halfway house. He must also undergo mental health treatment. He was ordered not to have contact with the victim's family. Quote, the court took a thoughtful, data-driven approach. This wasn't about emotion or sympathy. It was about fairness. The judge looked at the comparable sentences nationwide and imposed one that reflects both justice and proportionality, end quote, Sepulveda's lawyer Karen Hoopus Manouche said. Sepulveda was 20 in 1994 when, at his orders, gang underlings shot execution-style Jose Mendez, a leader of the Netas, after inviting him to smoke marijuana. Quote, the court recognized that a mandatory life without parole sentence imposed on a 20-year-old more than 3 decades ago is now, quote, unusually long when viewed in light of the current scientific, legal, and societal understandings. The court also acknowledged Mr. Sepulveda's rehabilitation, his traumatic childhood and brain injury, and the fact that he was neither the shooter nor present at the scene of the homicide, Manouche said in court papers. Federal prosecutors staunchly opposed his release and urged McConnell not to extend leniency. Quote, the defendant was a leader, not a follower. He was one of giving orders, Assistant U.S. Attorney Stacey Erickson wrote. Quote, life imprisonment is what the government recommended some 28 years ago for King Paradise, quote, the Inca of Latin kings, who was responsible for the ruthless killing of Jose Mendez and who ordered the execution of others. Life imprisonment is what the victims in this case endorse. It is a sentence that gives them finality and serves the ends of justice. The family of the victim has been subject to the defendant's denials of responsibility for over 20 years, end quote, prosecutors said. Prosecutors highlighted the case of another gang associate of Sepulveda's, Joel Francisco, a notorious narcotics dealer and one-time gang leader whom McConnell in 2019 released from a life sentence under federal drug sentencing reforms, only to have him be accused months later of fatally stabbing a man on Federal Hill. Francisco, 47, has pleaded not guilty to the murder of Troy Pine and is awaiting trial. Quote, in light of how frequently and persistently Sepulveda proclaimed his innocence in the past, his most recent expression of remorse in his filing should be viewed with skepticism, quote, prosecutors urged. Sepulveda repeatedly sought release after he was sentenced to 3 concurrent life terms following a 44-day trial in 1997. At first, U.S. District Court of Appeals panel in 2022 affirmed retired Judge Mary M. List's opinion that Sepulveda continued to pose a danger to the community despite the passage of more than 2 decades behind bars. The 3-judge panel ruled that Lisi was correct in finding that no extraordinary and compelling circumstances existed to warrant Sepulveda's release under the First Step Act, a 2018 law that gives federal judges discretion to consider whether extraordinary and compelling factors exist that justify the reduction of a prison sentence. End of article. Next article. Trump set to list program closures, more layoffs loom. An article by Bert Jansen, Joey Garrison, Sudishka Koshi, and Zachary Shimele. Washington. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said the federal government shutdown could soon cost the United States economy $15 billion a day, as he called for moderate Senate Democrats to join Republicans to reopen the government. Quote, be heroes, Bessent said in an October 15th news conference. Break away from the hive of radicalism and do something for the American people because we're starting to cut muscle here, end quote. Republicans control the House, Senate, and White House, but they need 60 votes in the Senate to avoid a filibuster to pass a funding bill, something they say they've been able to achieve in multiple votes on a bill to fund the government through November 21st. A 10th vote was expected October 15th, but without hope of passage. Democrats have demanded that the reversal of the Republicans' recent cuts to Medicaid and the extension of the expiring Affordable Care Act subsidies be included in any funding measure. House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican of Louisiana, warned that, quote, we're barreling toward one of the longest shutdowns in American history, unless Democrats drop their partisan demands, end quote. The longest shutdown lasted 35 days during President Donald Trump's first term. The White House Office of Management and Budget said on social media it was preparing to lay off more federal workers. Trump said he would release a list October 17th of programs he has eliminated. Quote, "We are closing up Democrat programs that we disagree with, and they're never going to be open again," he said. Johnson and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat of New York, will appear together on C-SPAN to debate the shutdown, according to a news release from the network. No date was immediately set. However, congressional Republicans are trying something new to attempt to fund parts of the government. Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Republican of South Dakota, slated a procedural vote on October 16th for a full-year defense spending bill. Congress often keeps the government open by passing short-term funding measures, something Thune has said he wants to change. Even as the shutdown has continued, lawmakers in both parties have been working to draft a full-year appropriations bills. As congressional leaders continued their standoff, the federal workers protecting them went without pay. The head of the Capitol Police Union called on lawmakers to end the shutdown in an October 14 statement that noted officers missed their first full paychecks on October 10th. Quote, "The longer the shutdown drags on, the harder it becomes for my officers," end quote. Capitol Police Union Chair Gus Papathanazu said in a statement, quote, "Banks and landlords do not give my officers a pass because we're in a shutdown. They still expect to be paid." Washington Senator Maria Cantwell, a top Democrat on the Transportation Committee, demanded an investigation into Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem for providing what she called, quote, "a partisan video to play in airports." Cantwell alleged the violation of the Hatch Act, which limits political activities by federal employees. At least 6 airports refused to play the video. Jeffrey told reporters October 14th that congressional Democrats, quote, "remain committed to finding a bipartisan path forward." Johnson told reporters October 14th he had nothing to negotiate because Republicans put no special policy provisions in the legislation to reopen the government until November 21st. He said health care costs could be negotiated after the government reopens. Contributing to this article was Zach Anderson of USA Today. End of article. Next article. Police. ICE agents involved in a crash that downs a utility pole. An article by Mark Reynolds. Providence. Federal agents with the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, were involved in a motor vehicle crash that brought down a utility pole on a street corner along Chalkstone Boulevard on Tuesday, October 14th, according to Providence Police. Police initially went to the scene where Chalkstone meets Raymond Street at 12:45 p.m., said a police spokesman, Christy Dos Reis, who provided no further information regarding the specific circumstances of the crash. The initial report received by police was that the accident involved a police officer and civilians. Upon arrival, it was determined that the individuals involved were federal agents with ICE, Dos Reis said. An investigation continues. In July, police were summoned to a scene on Alverson Avenue in the Hartford neighborhood where an ICE agent had crashed into a vehicle and where federal personnel were still engaged in an effort to capture a man who was in a nearby house. That episode exposed officers to accusations that they had violated a city ordinance that restrains them from certain types of cooperation with ICE. End of article. Next article, Plane Crash Victims Remembered for Generous Spirit, an article by Savannah Dunning of the Newport Daily News. Thomas and Agatha Perkins, the Middletown couple, who died in a private plane crash on Monday, October 13th, were fixtures on Aquidneck Island who supported several community organizations. As the National Transportation Safety Board undertakes its investigation into the crash, the Aquidneck Island community is collectively mourning the loss. The couple was en route to Kenosha, Wisconsin, when their private aircraft, a Socata TPM 700, crashed near Interstate 195's Exit 19 in Dartmouth, Massachusetts. Thomas Perkins himself was the pilot, having just taken off from New Bedford Municipal Airport at 8:08 a.m. Monday morning, minutes before the plane crashed into the highway. Tom and Agatha were the only people on board the plane when it crashed. Neither one survived. Tom and Aggie, as they're often referred to, have been active in the Aquidneck Island community work for decades, and not just through the family business, Kirby Perkins Construction. Agatha's brother, Jerry Kirby, made his brother-in-law a partner in the construction firm in 1997, and it remains one of Aquidneck Island's largest construction firms, specializing in historic restoration, having a hand in the renovation and preservation of several famous Newport buildings, such as the ones housing the Newport Art Museum and the Newport Country Club. Beyond the construction business, the couple and their Perkins Family Fund have financially supported many of the island's largest charitable organizations, including Save the Bay, Aquidneck Island Land Trust, and the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Community Center in Newport. Quote, "We are saddened by the loss of Tom and Aggie Perkins," end quote, Save the Bay Executive Director Topher Hamlet said in a statement. Quote, "Their passion for Narragansett Bay was best expressed through Aggie's participation as a swimmer in our annual Bay Swim fundraiser, which she did a dozen times. They were generous and enthusiastic supporters of Save the Bay's mission and work." Terry Sullivan, the executive director at the Aquidneck Islands Land Trust, noted that the couple had just recently attended the organization's September golf tournament. Quote, "The board and staff of the Aquidneck Island Land Trust are deeply saddened by the passing of long-term supporters Agatha and Tom Perkins," Sullivan said in a statement. The Perkins made meaningful contributions to conserving the lands and waters of Aquidneck Island, having a lasting legacy in a place they loved. We extend our heartfelt condolences to the Perkins and Kirby families during this difficult time, especially to our friend and board member Matt Kirby, Agatha's brother, who, like his sister, does so much for our island communities. In response to the news of the couple's deaths, the MLK Center postponed a screening of Water Brother, a documentary film about the Newport surfer and skater Sid Abruzzi, and produced by Agatha's brother Jerry Kirby, that had been scheduled for October 15th. Quote, "Our hearts are with Jerry, Kirby, and the Perkins family, and the Kirby Perkins construction family during this profoundly difficult time," the MLK Center said in a statement. End of article. Next article. High turnout predicted at October 18th rallies. No Kings organizers plan more than 700 locations after success in June. An article by Sarah D. Wire of the USA Today. While October 18th's No Kings protests share a name with their June predecessors, organizers are expecting an unmatched flood of people for what they believe will be the largest single day of protest in modern American history. Altogether, 2,500 events are scheduled in big cities, suburbs, and tiny towns across the nation, dwarfing the 1,800 that were scheduled for June 14th. Anchor events are planned outside the Capitol in Washington, D.C., and in Boston, New York, Atlanta, Kansas City, San Francisco, Chicago, New Orleans, and Bozeman, Montana. Quote, the anger level is way higher than it was in June for the last protests of the same name, said Public Citizen co-president Lisa Gilbert, one of the organizers. Things have changed. Organizers and activists told USA Today the Trump administration has ramped up immigration enforcement, sent troops into several cities, made massive changes to American health care, and cracked down on the First Amendment. There's been an actual chipping away at democracy, at foundational rights and prerogatives, Gilbert said. Quote, people are saying I've never been moved to action before, but now I feel like I have to. Quote, if you're not scared, you're not paying attention. These folks are serious. They are actively trying to take away your constitutional right to peaceful protest, and that is how authoritarian regimes work, said Indivisible co-founder Ezra Levin, another of the organizers. Quote, they fear more than anything one thing, which is mass, peaceful, organized population pushing back against their unpopular designs. Other hosting organizations include long-standing activism groups like Move On, the American Civil Liberties Union, Human Rights Campaign, and Working Families Power, along with multiple unions and grassroots groups such as 5501 that have formed since Election Day 2024. The name No Kings comes from the organizers' belief that President Donald Trump is acting like a monarch rather than the leader of a democracy. When asked to comment on the protests, White House spokesman Abigail Jackson responded, "Who cares? Organizers with worth fighting for the root country have planned a mile long for democracy with people waving signs along the major street in the Colorado mountain town of Steamboat Springs," according to organizer Jacqueline Denny, 57. Denny said 1,500 people turned out in June, and she expects more October 18th in response to immigration and custom enforcement actions in the area. Quote, they are taking our people and terrifying our people, and that feels so much more personal, she said. She expects some people to protest over fears that public lands could be sold or destroyed, and others are likely to come out against Trump's threats to crack down on protests, she said. The need to protest, quote, feels very real and crucial right now, Denny said. Some Republican leaders accuse Democrats of prolonging the government shutdown for the sake of the No Kings protests, saying Democrats want to show party activists they're pushing back on the Trump administration. House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican of Louisiana, said on October 10th on Fox News that Democrats won't reopen the government until after the rallies because, quote, they can't face their rabid base. Johnson called the D.C. event a, quote, hate America rally. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy told Fox that he expected millions of attendees would be part of Antifa, paid protesters. Antifa, for short, is anti-fascist, a loosely organized leaderless group of activists. Organizers laughed off Republicans' claim that the Democrats were keeping the government closed for them. Still, Levin acknowledged the backdrop of the government shutdown and said activists are watching elected Democrats stand with them in opposition to Trump. He's telling Democratic lawmakers, if you surrender again, primary season is around the corner, and people are going to be looking for new leadership. Some Democrats joined with Republicans to keep the government open in March. Only one member of Congress, Senator Chris Murphy, Democrat of Connecticut, has been scheduled to speak at the D.C. protest. Organizers are also pushing back on GOP claims that the protests will be dangerous. Previous protests held by this coalition have been overwhelmingly peaceful. Local organizers are required to undergo security and de-escalation training. We're making it really clear that what we want to achieve here is peaceful. And we are taking to the streets to exercise our First Amendment rights and speak out. We're not planning anything in any way that could be misconstrued as violence. The No Kings protests are not a place to cause trouble, said the Reverend Paul Rauschenbusch, president of the Interfaith Alliance, which is mobilizing faith groups nationwide to participate. With National Guard troops deployed in multiple large cities, organizers say that some people may fear coming to the protest, but it is important to show up in large numbers. The best way to prevent your speech from being stifled is having so many people exercising their First Amendment rights together that Trump can't possibly arrest all of them, Hunter Dunn, the national spokesman for the protest group, told USA Today. Seema Kanani, a healthcare worker and naturalized citizen who attended the first No Kings protest, as well as others, said that she's not afraid. I deeply believe in nonviolence and organizing, especially being a person of East Indian heritage and being an immigrant myself. I've always had to actually calm their anxiety so that my own, But no, I'm not all worried because of all these protests. One thing in common is that they're peaceful, she said. And that's all I have for today. Thank you for listening. See you next time.